We consider ourselves like total experience. So if you think about how things were even 5 years ago, there was a product experience, and then there was a customer experience, and then everything was sort of disjointed. We think about things holistically, and how can we help companies make better product experiences for their employees and also better customer experiences for their customers?
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by WriteForMe, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of Business Ninjas. I'm here today with Bill Thompson. He's the head of mobility at WritePoint. Bill, welcome to the show.
Kelsey, thank you very much for having me. I know everybody says that how they're excited to be on shows, but I'm excited to be here.
Well, hey, I'm excited to have you. Well, Bill, why don't you start and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm Bill Thompson. I'm the head of mobility at WritePoint, and I'm also a lecturer at the University of Michigan, where I'm focused around all things automotive, namely customer experience. Prior to joining WritePoint, I was at General Motors for nearly 20 years, where I led the in-vehicle user experience team. So digital interface has been my game for quite some time now. And I moved on to accept this position at WritePoint to bring that kind of learning and those types of connected solutions to multiple industries, not just automotive, but mobility. So we think of things that move by land, sea, or air. And we try to do that for our customers in a way that's as frictionless as possible for the user to enable them throughout their days.
Interesting. It sounds like you've had an interesting kind of experience leading up to WritePoint. So tell me a little bit more about WritePoint.
Yeah, so we consider ourselves like total experience. So if you think about how things were even 5 years ago, there was a product experience, and then there was a customer experience, and then everything was sort of disjointed. We think about things holistically, and how can we help companies make better product experiences for their employees and also better customer experiences for their customers? And the way that sort of equates is we have teams that are very good at building digital product, whether that's mobile integrations, whether that's websites, in-vehicle infotainment systems, things like that. And we have experts in the employee experience realm as well. So how do you onboard your employees? How do you give them the knowledge management skills that they need and the tools that they need to be successful in their roles? Because let's be honest, at an enterprise level, things are getting more complicated. And there's a deeper history, and there's a lot more turnover in the digital world today. So keeping employees well informed and well integrated and on top of trends and things like that is another area of our focus. And then finally, that customer experience. And I'll equate this through an example. We see a lot of transformation happening, especially in the automotive industry with electrification, but also sort of how somebody buys a car and where they're looking for that. So if you think about that in terms of the discovery and in terms of the purchase and in terms of the ownership, there's a lot to navigate through there. A lot of digital experiences, a lot of dealer experiences, and we help our clients really formulate the best journey and the best options for their customers. So those are sort of the three buckets that we live in, and we call that total experience.
I love that. That's fascinating. And, you mentioned something that I wanted to touch on a little bit, your experience with the automotive industry. You talked a little bit about by land, by sea. Are there specific industries that WritePoint really looks to target with its work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for my vertical in particular, which is mobility, the marine space is something that's interesting. And I have this sort of like cheeky little equation that I draw up on the board sometimes when I lecture, and it's, if consumer electronics are the leader in experiences, connected experiences, things like that, then automotive is the closest laggard, but they're about 3 to 5 years behind. The marine space is almost, in a way, a decade or a decade plus behind that for a number of reasons, right? They don't have a vertically integrated supply base. There isn't, an industry that really caters to that. It's sort of like the same people doing the same work and just incremental improvements. That's a big target for me. I'm a water kid. I love, 3 days after I was born, I was on the water, and I, have loved it ever since. And I just see a big opportunity to sort of close that gap in the marine space, and even in the RV space and the power sports space, to bring that closer to consumer electronics, because that's the customer expectation these days, right? I want to be able to download a user-friendly marine application that lets me navigate without having to plot very complicated courses. And I want to do things very simply. And that's something that we've done for the automotive industry, and in the automotive industry, that we can bring to these adjacent industries and really help kind of propel that to the next level.
RightPoint has such a strong focus on customer experience. Can you share some examples? I know you talked a little bit about, the customer experience, and all of that. Can you give some examples of, ways that you've been able to transform digital experience for your clients?
Yeah, for sure. I think if you think about the work that we've done at General Motors and the development of the Cadillac Lyriq, the co-development of the Cadillac Lyriq, the journey that we were really on with that project while I was at GM and then at RightPoint was to help close the gap of connectivity for the consumer and provide a landscape that allowed people to access content, to download things in new ways, but not have to be sitting in your car while you did it, but be able to do that through your mobile or through your web or through your owner center. And really, once you own your car, there's a theory that I call relevancy over time. And how do you provide somebody who just paid all this money for that vehicle a pipeline of content, whether it's a marketplace or audio or video or whatever the case may be, performance upgrades for a vehicle, and I would say reach them where they're at. So if I'm sitting on my couch and I see an ad on the TV and I scan the QR code for the latest performance upgrade that just goes to my car, that's a great example of a frictionless journey and a way to be able to extend that vehicle to your entire ecosystem, and vice versa. So I think that dimensionally has been good. Now we take that foundation and we actually build upon that when we start thinking about things like dealers, things like purchase, things like shopping. How do you shop? What types of tools do you shop for when you're looking for a car? Mostly web, probably. We're starting to see things pop up on TV, right? You can interact with the ad and it brings you into a very specific thing that was built for that. But once you like start thinking about the world of accessories and aftermarket and part, some of the things that we think about are, sure, you could go to a website and click through and see the thing in a visualizer, but wouldn't it be cool to have an augmented reality experience where you're actually looking at your car and accessorizing and customizing? It's still a marketplace, but it gives that user the real-time context to be able to see their thing in their environment. We see this on Amazon, right? Like, I want to buy a couch and I can see what the couch looks like in my space for the most part, right? So things like that are how we're helping to enable the automotive industry, the mobility industry, make that connection a little bit more deep for their products and for their consumers.
It sounds like, RightPoint really leverages a lot of, modern technology to make that user experience, the best that it can be. Do you think that is one of the ways that RightPoint is really able to differentiate itself from the competition?
Yeah, I think so. We have some very strong partnerships with Microsoft. We're a partner of the year for a few years running now. And that's a huge thing that allows us to just understand, like, hey, let's help enable your employees, because your employees are who is going to help enable your customer. And then we have partnerships with companies like Adobe, right, who have a tremendous suite of commerce and content management and creative tools to help enable those visions and bring those to life. And then on top of that, we've got other partners, other smaller partners at startups who are really focusing on bringing things like AR technologies to market at scale, but they can do it very quickly because they're not bogged down with some of these bigger, I'll say, enterprise level constraints.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's fascinating to be, like you said, to Microsoft's partner, for several years running. I think that's fantastic. And, to the point of RightPoint's tagline being experience is everything, correct me if I'm wrong. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what that means to your team and, how you drive your approach to really incorporate that in every project?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that everything starts with a vision. Okay. Historically, throughout my career, you can look at a spreadsheet and understand the numbers. You can look at a PowerPoint and get a sense of whatever. You can look at a feature list and say, okay, this is what it's going to be. But if you don't have a vision, if you don't have a journey map, if you don't have a persona, of a picture in your mind of who is going to use this thing, whatever the thing is, and how they're going to use it and how it's going to affect their daily lives, until you take that customer-centric view and that empathetic view, honestly, you're kind of guessing. And then you start to do some user research and you start to do some market research and you mold your story. And you may end up adjusting your product. There are products that we thought were going to be huge hits that we've 180 degreed on, because after we've gained some market insights and done some things, it's like, oh, this is not what people are looking for. This is what we thought people were looking for. And it's only because we take that moment to step back and understand the vision, but also bring the different stakeholders along. If you're it doesn't matter if you're a finance person, a creative person, a business person, a procurement person, having everybody involved in the vision of whatever you're trying to build, whether it's a product experience, a customer experience, or an employee experience, from the very early stages, it gets everybody engaged and it gets them excited and it lets them know, like, hey, this isn't just ones and zeros. These are human beings. There's a very human-centric element that we want to ensure that we capture. And I think it all starts with that. And that's kind of the RightPoint way, we call it. It's our superpower to understand that we are building the right thing before we start building things right. And a lot of people switch right to the building things before they even understand if they're doing the right thing.
That's really interesting. I love that customer-centric approach because it's so important, because really, the consumers are the ones that are driving all of, the decisions, the market. So making sure that, you are reaching that audience that you want to reach, having that vision is so important. And, to pivot a little bit, Bill, I'm curious to pick your brain. I know during COVID, the mobility industry took a bit of a hit. It was it was an interesting time for that. Talk to me a little bit about what that time looked like at RightPoint.
So that was interesting because obviously, I'll tell you a very specific story. We were bursting at the seams in our office here in Detroit with people and resources and clients. And it was like exactly how you would expect an agency consultant to look: people in, people out. This is going on, a lot of things happening. And then COVID hits. We were actually looking for a new office when that happened to help, sustain the sort of growth that we were having. And then COVID hit and that's gone. Right. And you have to very quickly, within days, right? Because, the sentiment was this is going to be 2 weeks, or this is going to be a month, or it's going to be whatever. And the reality of it, we know what we're at now. We're still living it. But I think that the way that we operationalized and organized our people and rallied them around the goals that we were trying to achieve for our clients is the glue that holds any project together, right? And we do a range of things here. We obviously try to lean into longer scale engagements, multi-year, engagements, but there are things that we do that are project based. And I think when something like that happens, again, I would just want to reiterate, like, you have to make your people, you have to give them something to focus on. And for a lot of us, the thing to focus on was the work that was in front of us and the goals that were in front of us and the deliverables that were in front of us. And we would do things like approach our clients with, hey, let's do a clean vehicle study, because obviously this is something that's going to be important moving forward. What kind of materials are we using? How are people sharing? So like rideshare was like, you get into a taxi in any big city and you're like, oh, kind of gross, kind of sticky, but I accept that. How can we help solve that problem? Because we know people are going to want to be conscious of that. And people are going to want to understand, like, choice A versus choice B. Choice B may not hit my ideal, but it's clean and it's got whatever. There's sanitizer in there, things like that we were looking at, right? And I think that then parlayed into how do we take that notion of clean today and make that clean, sustainable curve kind of indefinite and always there? So we see that sustainability curve for cleanliness, for the mobility industry being something that stuck around, quite frankly. Think about mass transit and things like that. Those ratings become very important, and those priorities become important. And it's up to, we feel like it's our responsibility as arbiters of customer experience to help companies understand that they need to enable things like that for their clients or for their customers.
You mentioned something, Bill, talking about looking for, obviously longer, length relationships, projects, all of that, but then also too, smaller projects. Walk me through a little bit about kind of what each of those engagements may look like.
Sure. Yeah. So, I believe, and I'll be fully transparent here. When I first contracted agencies, when I was at WritePoint, or when I was at General Motors, there was a belief that, okay, you have to go to the approved supplier base. And I had to challenge that, right? Because if you're going to get what you always kind of got, incrementally better. We wanted to think very differently. And WritePoint came in with this sort of perspective of, look, let's do something small to start, build your trust in us, and then let's see where it goes from there. And that's a philosophy that always stuck with me. Having been, on the OEM side for so long, you're not always afforded that opportunity to step back and say, hey, let's start with this small piece of work. And that's a multi-year engagement now at this point. So I believe in those smaller projects that really can help propel. And there's quite frankly, there's things that we're just good at that certain clients are like, hey, can you come help solve this integration piece for us on, whatever the platform, maybe a Microsoft platform, an Adobe platform, and roll that out for us and teach us how to do it. And then we've got it from there. And that's cool too, because that also gives us, the purview into other industries or other clients and other understanding that then we can kind of build into our aggregate intelligence to make us sort of give us this ability to see around the corner from adjacent industries and bring that back to existing partners to help grow those relationships. So that's kind of how it can start small and scale into, but also be project-based.
Interesting. I'm curious to pick your brain a little bit. I think you started to kind of dip your toe in the water a little bit, but I'm curious to pick your brain a little bit about more common misconceptions that people may have. Because it sounds like you said, projects may look like they start off small, but end up having to be a little more in depth or vice versa. Are there any common misconceptions that you hear, either about mobility, about transportation, the industry in general, user experience, any misconceptions that you hear often?
Yeah, I think so. So, everybody can critique. It's very easy to critique. It's very easy to tear down, no matter what you do. It doesn't have to be just mobility. It can be podcasting. It can be anything, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that the last, few generations of social media have given everybody a voice and given everybody a platform where, kind of when you start to see your products that are near and dear to your heart sort of roll out and somebody starts to tear it apart, you take it a little bit personally, but then you grow through this phase where you're like, well, wait a minute, let me actually think about that from, the consumer's perspective, because I've been in situations in my career where I've been too close to product, and I want to ensure that I am kind of listening and keeping an open mind about the types of feedback that we're getting and where that's coming from. So that maybe gets to a little bit of your question, but to sort of build upon that from there. The misconception that we hear mostly is that it's just digital stuff. It's easy. Just change it. I don't like the way that works. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. The good news is kind of like the entire industry is plagued by that. It doesn't work like my iPhone, or it doesn't work like my Android, or it doesn't work like my car. And it's like, yeah, they're three unique operating systems. And I heard that one for a number of years. I can remember I was sitting in a room doing a review with one of our teams, and an executive who had been a part of this team for quite some time. We were showing an animation, and there was a little QuickTime video, play, pause, fast forward, rewind indicator over the top. And I remember we got through it, and the comment was made like, sure, I get all that, but is that play pause? What does that do? I don't understand. So like, there was this like, whoa, okay, we got to take it back even further. Yeah. And depending on where our clients are in their journey, you still have to combat things like that. And the tools that we're using now are so much more advanced, and they're advancing daily. And we have partners who have been in the same ecosystem for a number of years, and it's challenging for them to understand why they would ever do anything else, and why they would change a process, or why they would change a tool, or why they would change a flow, because they still get the same result. And a lot of that is on us to educate and bring that back to, hey, it's the change is hard, but when you get there, these things do become easy. So you can react to consumer sentiment more quickly.
I really appreciate that insight, and I appreciate you sharing that, Bill. It's an interesting story of a little bit of a history. Well, awesome. Well, Bill, I think this has been a great conversation. As we start to wrap up, where can people go to learn more about RightPoint?
Yeah, please visit us at WritePoint.com. You can go in there and get a ton of information on all of our different industries that we support, from financial services to mobility to consumer packaged goods and retail. And I think it's a wonderful way that our friends from this podcast can go and not just learn more, but deep dive some of the case studies and see the types of work that we've done and the things that are showcased on there, and get some ideas and a sense for how we work and what total experience really means.
Love that. That's fantastic. Well, Bill, as we start to wrap up, any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, I think just what I put a posting out on LinkedIn today, right? Like, I think we're all so laser focused right now on look at the thing that I'm building, look at what I'm working, look at the team, look at the this, look at the that, and there's like this inundation, this constant pulse of just content. And I put one out there today that just says, "Hi, how's everybody doing today?" Right? Like, just stepping back and taking a moment to be somewhat human in a public forum like that. Like, I'll be the first one to say, it's not all polished all the time. People make mistakes. We make mistakes. We learn from them. That's how we learn, and we improve. And the reason that I bring that LinkedIn post up is because I got more DMs from that message just saying, thanks for being human. Thanks for engaging. Thanks for asking. It was weird because not a ton of people are engaging, kind of publicly. And that wasn't even the intent. It was just, how is everybody?
Yeah.
Because there is some tension in society right now, and a lot of that going around. And I think the more sort of, like I said, human we can be with each other, the more, we can realize, like, hey, I don't know what you're going through. We don't know what you're going through, but let's go through it together and help each other where we can. And that was really the intent of that. And I think that gets back to what we were talking about in the beginning, was let's be human-centric to each other. And that involves a certain amount of empathy and understanding.
You took the words out of my mouth, being human-centric, and also recognizing that, before people are your consumers or your clients, they're people first.
Right.
But Bill, I think this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you being on Business Ninjas today.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. It's been awesome talking to you, and hopefully look forward to doing it again.
Yeah, this was fantastic. Great to have you.